enjoying this meeting so far because we have still a very exciting program ahead of us, and it's going to even get better. But before I present our special speaker, our next special speaker, I would like to recognize and thank some people that came in. I would like to recognize Dr. Leandris Liebert and Dr. Patty Tucker. Leandris is the director of the Minority Health and Health Equity Center at the Center for Disease Control, and Patty is the director of our REACH US program. Both of them I've known for the last 12 years. Been with us when we started our, I can say, base of work in the area of health disparities and improving our communities through our funding for REACH US, and they're one of the sponsors of this symposium today. And they drove this morning from Atlanta to be with us, and we really appreciate your presence here in Stanford. Is committed and interest in this topic. I would also would like to thank Mr. Tom Maxwell from the Regional Planning Commission Greater Birmingham for his support and arranging a lot of the activities yesterday, including the bikes, and it's in the front page of Birmingham News today. So Tom, thank you so much. I would like now to introduce our special speaker, Mayor Enrique Penalosa, and I've heard about him several years ago from Maria. I never thought it's going to come the day that we're going to meet in person. When we started just to think small about our Walk Feel Alive campaign, and had the vision that everybody in Birmingham is going to, wear our t-shirts and pick up pedometers and walk, and you've seen now that this program has spread not only in urban areas, but in our rural Alabama and rural Mississippi, where thousands of people are walking. But we looked at his programs and his visions, and we tried to imitate it on a small scale. But just for you to know a little bit more about Mayor Penalosa, he served a 3-year term as a mayor of Bogota on December 31. He's trained as an economist, he's a great administrator, but he's also a visionary that, passionate visionary that was able to implement numerous radical improvements in the city, and also to promote a model to give priority to very important thing is children and public spaces. As we heard from Mr. Oscar Diaz, he also was behind building hundreds of kilometers of sidewalk, bicycle paths, pedestrian streets, greenways, and parks. And also after organizing the Car-Free Day in 2000, he was awarded the Stockholm Challenge Award and rewarded by referendum vote endorsing an annual car-free day and the elimination of all cars from streets during rush hours from 2015 onwards. He also led efforts to improve, which this is very important for our communities, Bogota's marginal neighborhoods through citizen involvement, which we believe in the community-based participatory approaches, and that's what he based his planning on. He planted more than 100,000 trees, created new highly successful bus-based transit systems, and turned the deteriorated downtown avenue into a dynamic pedestrian public spaces, and more and more. And the good thing that he's now didn't just stay where in Bogota, but now he's replicating all these models around the world. I met Mayor Penalosa for the first time yesterday, and I want to warn you, like, in a few minutes, I recognized a passionate, committed man, and this passion is contagious. So we're looking forward to his presentation now. So Mayor Penalosa, we thank you for being with us here today.
Thank you very much. I want to thank you very much to all of you. I'd like to share with you some ideas and experiences, and I am sure by the end of my talk, many of you will be radically in disagreement with me. This is, here we are talking about many objectives. Health, we just heard Brian talking about economic growth, sustainability, very different objectives, which what I could even add a few more to this. For example, social equity. And what is fascinating is that I believe many of these things are complementary, they are not contradictory. We can achieve them all at the same time. But we are going to consider some of the very basic objectives. I was always very fascinated when I read some stories, which I don't know if it's true or not, that the American Indians were shocked when they were asked if they would sell their land. And they said, after a while, they said, sure, we'll sell you the land, and if you want, we'll sell you also the moon and the air. You know? To them, it seemed that land was something God had given to everybody to enjoy and to live from, but nobody could appropriate. I love this picture of planet Earth because when we see the planet Earth like this, and even more so if we see a picture where planet Earth is only a small little point in the middle of the space, we realize we really are passengers of a self-sustaining spaceship without known destination. And when we see the planet like this, we see how close we are to each other, and we all humans from anywhere, any nation, we are companions. We share our common destiny. However, when we come down here, we realize we are not so close to each other. Especially if you have a Colombian passport. It's very difficult to go almost anywhere in the world. You have to really make a line. It's very difficult to get a visa. So you are only allowed to be in that piece of the planet where is your country, nowhere else. To go anywhere else, you may get permission. You may get permission, but that's a kind favor, not a right that you have. And once you're in your country, you realize that in fact, most of the land in your country is private. It's not really yours. So if you enter private property, you may even get killed. So it's not really like your country is yours. And then you come to your city, and you go to you enter some private property in a building, and you may get killed as well. And you go out into the street, and you also get killed. So all this long story, just to emphasize that in this whole planet, the only microscopic piece to which we have access is public pedestrian space in our city. That's the only piece of the planet to which we have access. Sidewalks, parks, very few spaces. So this is the most crucial, the most important part of a city, public pedestrian space. Now, quality pedestrian space is a very fascinating. Most things I mean, for example, good transport. Transport is good to have good transport. This will not make us happy. Good transport is a means to an end, to have economic development. For example, to have great high-speed internet or whatever. It's a good means. Public pedestrian space is an end in itself. I mean, it just makes you happier, and it's an amazing good. The years can go by, 100 years, 200, 300 years, and it does not diminish its capacity to yield well-being. Now, here is the American Declaration of Independence. It's a wonderful thing. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What a beautiful thing to mention, happiness. Unfortunately, when they made the Constitution a few years later, maybe lawyers got in the way and they took happiness out of it. But the fact is that happiness is a very peculiar thing, because happiness is the real goal that matters. It's very difficult to define, it's impossible to measure, but we cannot forget that that's what it is all about. That's what we want, that's what we try to do every day of our lives. So we have to arrive to a city that is propitious to happiness. What kind of city is propitious to happiness? How would a city be? I mean, these Dutch and Danish cities which have been mentioned, one thing that is interesting about this is that they have an income per capita much higher than any American city. It's not because they are poor that they ride bicycles. So this is also when we talk about here cities with little car use and all this, it seems like it's some kind of crazy hippie that is talking about these cities. However, cities without cars or very little cars are the most attractive in the planet today. They not only exist, but they are the ones that attract the most investment, the most tourism. They have the higher real estate prices. So Manhattan, London, Paris, we are not talking of some crazy utopia. They exist. And not only do they exist, I insist that they are the most attractive and valuable and attractive to investors that are in the planet. So we are not talking about some crazy environmental dreams. Now, equality is also an interesting issue because many people think equality is a thing of the past. After communism failed, clearly we in the planet, all of us believe that the best way to manage most of society's resources is private property and the market. And clearly that generates inequality. Some people have to make more money, some others less, some corporations succeed, others fail. So, can we forget about equality? I don't think so. We have been for more than 2,000 years seeking more equality. Since Judeo-Christian revolution, Greece, even before Rome, over the last 300 years, most of the great revolutions, social conflicts. So, but we cannot have income equality. So what kind of equality can we hope for? I will propose that we can achieve, even with the most radical capitalism, two kinds of equality. One, quality of life equality, at least for children. That all children should have access to great education, music lessons, swimming pools, parks. And another very basic principle. The first article in all constitutions, any constitution in the planet says all citizens are equal before the law. It sounds like a nice sounding empty sentence. No, it's very powerful. If all citizens are equal before the law, for example, a bus with 80 passengers has a right to 80 times more space in the road than a car with one. This is not communism, this is basic democracy, besides being a more efficient way of using road space. Or somebody in a bicycle has the same right to same mobility as somebody in a car. Now, what is a good city? Because here, you know, I was talking to some person here in the, outside about some crazy proposals I'm going to do for, very responsible for Birmingham because I have only been here a few hours. But I say, I have to propose some crazy things, otherwise what's the use of this meeting? You know, it's some more. So, we have to have at least, if we have a magic wand, how would our city be? I love a wonderful urbanist, Jan Gale, who says, a good city is one where people want to be out in public space, not inside our home, not in a shopping mall, but we love to go out and see people in parks, in sidewalks, in cafes. A city where once people want to be outside, that's what a great city is. Parks, plazas, cafes, restaurants. Now, we have some needs beyond eating and having water and clean water. So we need to be with people, to have fun. We like to be with people. We like to walk. We need to walk. And bicycle riding is like a more efficient way of walking. Not because we need this to survive. We could live all our lives inside an apartment and order everything by phone or internet. We like to walk the same, we need to walk the same way birds need to fly, fish need to swim, just to be happy. And here we come into many of the things about cities are not measurable. This is not engineering, with all due respect to the engineers here. Here, this building, for example, if it doesn't have the foundations and the steel in its structure that it requires, it will collapse. This is something that can be measured. That's engineering. But this roof, this ceiling, could be much lower, and we could still be meeting here. We don't need these nice lamps, these fancy lamps, you know. This is something that we feel better because the ceiling is higher, because we have this nice lamp. This is more architecture. So in the same way, I cannot prove mathematically that it's better to have a 10-meter wide sidewalk than to have a 2-meter wide sidewalk. This is not something I can prove. This is something each person feels in his own heart and soul. You feel, well, it's not something, and much of things that have to do with design are something that can only be felt. They cannot be measured and be put into a mathematical model. Now, this is an interesting thing. A city, you see, no cars around. Well, a city that is good for children, for the elderly, for the handicapped, for the poor, I would say it's a city that's good for everybody else. A city that is not only good, let's change the word good for fun. A city that is fun for these people, for the most vulnerable citizens in society, it will be good for everybody else. But we tend to design cities much more for cars than for children. If we tell a 3-year-old anywhere in the planet, they are barely learning to speak, yet they tell you, watch out, a car, and the child jumps in fright. And with a good reason, because there are tens of thousands of children who get killed by cars every year. But this is not what is shocking. What is shocking is that we think this is normal. You know, that we have gotten used to the fact that it's normal that our children grow in fear of getting killed. After 5,000 years of creating cities, we are at a time in which our children grow in fear of getting killed. This is normal, and we think this is the way life is. This is a Chinese city, before a very old city, before there were no bicycles perhaps, but a child could walk without any fear of getting killed. A city friendly to people or friendly to cars, because there are some conflicts. It's not because, you know, for whom should we give space? I mean, cars above, cars below. We were very generous to leave some space for people there. How about this? Would you like an apartment there? I mean, very nice. High velocity roads are like fences. The more high velocity roads, they begin to enclose you. You cannot. Here we were riding a bicycle yesterday, and this is the highway, I don't know which number. And they say the road used to go across, but as the highway was built, this road was closed. So they begin to make people less and less. They begin to reduce the mobility, and it's like a fence, more and more and more. So there is a cost. Maybe it's necessary, maybe it's wonderful. I'm not against highways altogether, but they have a cost in terms of the livability of a city. The bigger the road, the faster the road, the less pleasant it is to be around. It's a typical NIMBY. We all need highways, but nobody really wants to live next to a highway. Clearly, the homes that are next to a highway, they are worth much less than those which are 3 or 4 blocks away, even in the same neighborhood. So clearly, even in economic terms, this can be measured. Many cities, of course, have demolished elevated highways, which did damage to quality of life. This is a very famous case in Seoul, where they invested $9 million, not to build this highway, but to demolish it, because they wanted to open this out. This is a little creek. And this was so successful, the mayor who did this was elected president of Korea afterwards. I would say that if we are going to do anything in a city, one way to measure whether it's good or bad is, does it make the city more or less pleasant to walk, to be there on foot? Many times there are many discussions. For example, whether a building should be 60-story high or 10-story high. Much more important whether the building is 10-story high or 2-story is, once the building is built, is it more pleasant to be there next to it, to talk, to play? Spaces for pedestrians. But cars are very recent in human history. This is Tokyo in the Middle Ages. A child could walk many blocks without any fear. Even after trams appeared, you know. This is very advanced cities, you know, because we tend to think before cars we lived in caves. No, there were a lot of, there was science, there was art, Beethoven had composed his music more than 100 years before the first cars appeared, you know, it's not like, this is Paris before cars, almost 1900, you know, it was a very nice city, you know. These were wealthy cities where there was science and art, you know. New York, 1905, very advanced cities, it's not like, once cars appeared, they ran people. First push people out to the sidewalks and afterwards to the suburbs. And one of the cities which has most suffered from this is Birmingham. This is one of the great tragedies. It's not people running away, and it's very ironic because suburbs are totally car dependent, yet people run out there in order to be able to escape, to have safe spaces for the children to ride bicycles without being run over by a car or something like this. And again, there you can also measure this economically. For example, in the cul-de-sac, in the neighborhood, the houses are more expensive. The house at the end of the cul-de-sac, the less traffic the house has in the same neighborhood, the more expensive it is. So clearly, people are paying to go where there are no cars, even though they are in totally car-dependent environments. So, I will say that the 20th century will be remembered as a disastrous in urban history. You know? People will say, how could people live in those horrible cities in 2010, 2012? The same way we say today, oh, how horrible London was in 1800. Yet at that time it was the most advanced and most admired city in the planet. Yet today we say, what a horrible city that was, so polluted and so congested and all that. So by the end of the 20th century, we began to realize we had made a mistake. And many cities began to pedestrianize areas that were only pedestrians, mostly in Europe, at least the historical areas, to close them to cars. Why did they do it? Because people liked it, because real estate prices increased. It was not because they wanted to be cute. No, it was good business. People liked it. You know, this wonderful city where children ride around by themselves. Maybe this is one of the best cities in the world, San Sebastián. This is two blind women in a pedestrian street in Santiago. I mean, how could they enjoy the city in the same way they didn't have this option without the noise? This again, as what was mentioned by Oscar Diaz, how Manhattan, Broadway, they took half the space away from Broadway and also pedestrianized a couple of years ago. All of this is happening. This is an interesting project. This is something we did in Bogota, in the city where it was growing. This is an old picture because once you are not a mayor any longer, it's very hard to get into a helicopter. So, we knew the city was going to grow there, so we put, this is a 24 kilometer, this is like a 16 mile long pedestrian and bicycle street only, through a very dense city. Only pedestrian, even our city is very poor, it's a different city than Birmingham, but no cables, you know, like, see the scale of this project. Now there is buildings all around it. I mean, the city grew around it. We knew it was going to grow like that. This is the scale of a pedestrian. Why not think different and have in all cities hundreds of kilometers, hundreds of miles of pedestrian and bicycle streets only. Imagine the pleasure to go out and ride in these bicycle highways. This is a typical illegal neighborhood in Bogota in the process of being legalized. We did it first the pedestrian area, later we paved the street for the cars. Here is this thing when it's already getting the buildings around it. Here see the pedestrians, the bicycles, and the cars in the mud. Of course, I would love to pave the street for the cars, but if we don't have enough money, what do you do first? We thought in these low-income neighborhoods, the best thing to show respect for human dignity was to treat the people with more respect than the cars. See, this is like parks and all these kinds of things. We decided to restrict. When we arrived to City Hall, we got, the Japanese cooperation agency is very dangerous. They go all over the world doing transport studies. And they always propose highways and highways and elevated highways. They have proposed like $20 billion in highways for Bogota, elevated highways, and I think, of course, you would not expect much less from a government agency in the country which sells the most cars in the world, directly or indirectly, or one of the ones. So, and also, many times they propose underground subways. the upper income people in developing countries love subways. Not because they have the slightest intention of ever getting into those subways, but because they think they will put the low income people and their buses underground, so they imagine they will have less traffic. World-class bicycle infrastructure, totally protected, beautiful bicycle highways would multiply bicycle use everywhere. This is this place when people are coming back from work, thousands of people. When we started doing bicycle infrastructure in Bogota, I will show at the end of this presentation, we went from 0 bicycle use almost in Bogota to more than 350,000 every day now. Where JICA, for example, proposed an 8-lane highway, we created a 30-kilometer, another greenway, it's another one, different from the one I showed before. Also, many people use it to go to work. This goes out of the city into the countryside, to a park outside, and it goes through. Bogota is a very dense, very compact city, exactly the opposite of Birmingham. Bogota is one of the highest density cities in the planet. So to have one of these greenways across the city is very difficult because we have more than 200 inhabitants per hectare. Only 4 or 5 cities in the planet have a higher density than Bogota. But this is not just for poor cities. This is in Germany, for example, in Munster, the main city in Munster, a university town, is and half the population uses the bicycle every day. Anyone's quality of life, I think, would improve with one of these giant pedestrian and bicycle roads near. Imagine that each of us would, 3 or 4 blocks from our home, we would enter one of these. It would change our life without noise, without cars, without any threat of being run over by a car. Now, sidewalks, already Oscar mentioned, but sidewalks I'm going to go very quickly, but just to say that what really makes a difference between an advanced and a backward city is quality sidewalks. What does this picture show? It shows lack of democracy. What this picture shows is that people with cars are first-class citizens, and those lower-income people without cars are third-class citizens. This shows lack of respect for human dignity. I would say that a good city, in every detail in a good city, should show that human beings are sacred. Clearly, this doesn't show that. This is developing countries. This is underdeveloped. And even in the poorest, the most disastrous cities, many times you find subways. You find highways in some African cities where half the population doesn't even have running water. But what you will never have in an advanced democratic city is quality sidewalks. So, we always require environmental impact studies. For any project that we do, I think we should also require human impact studies. I mean, this is for this road in India, for example. There are more pedestrians and bicycles than cars. However, there was no infrastructure for pedestrians or bicycles. Of course, I'm sure there was an environmental impact study to protect the frogs and the lizards, and that's wonderful. But I mean, children are also worth protecting. This is typical, this is again in India. They make this horrible flyover, which is useless, and then this is what they do for people next to it. Anyway, very quickly, but this is quickly. But this is in many American suburbs are like this. No sidewalks. This is very common in the United States. And they thought it was very elegant, And of course, people assume in these suburbs, people are going to be very careful with pedestrians. However, I have seen many times the mothers of children running the street. As soon as they hear a car, they run. Because there will be 1 million drivers who will be careful. But how about the 1 millionth and one is not? So, finally, it's not so pleasant to have. But this is an environment that is very disrespectful of human dignity, and it's very common in the United States. Colombian cities, many are disasters like this. Bogota, disaster. I was almost impeached. I had my hair black before that. So people used to tell me, look, this is where we make hundreds of sidewalks, and there was some space there. So people said, Mayor, you are so stubborn, because there is enough space in this sidewalk to park cars as well as for people to walk by. Is it the same thing as if I would say today, let's take away this space where people are parking here in the curbside in Birmingham, and let's make a bigger sidewalk. People will tell me, no, there is more than enough space. There is enough space for cars to park and for people to walk. So we have to have a TV commercial, we said. We tend to think that sidewalks are relatives of streets because they live next to each other. However, sidewalks have a different purpose. Streets are for getting cars from one place to another. Sidewalks can be used for that, for getting from one place to another, but sidewalks really are for talking, for playing, for doing business, for kissing. Sidewalks are much closer relatives of parks or of plazas than they are of streets. And to say that there is enough space in a sidewalk to park, to carve out a parking bay, and as well as for people to walk by, is equivalent to saying that you could turn the main park or the main plaza in a city into an open-air parking lot, so long as you leave enough space between cars for people to walk by. Clearly, this is not something you could measure. So we make big sidewalks, as big as you can make them. And here in Birmingham, you have some streets that are like highways to the city. You could take half the space in the street to turn into a pedestrian space. We are going to see that. Ideally, all small intersections should have, the sidewalk should continue at grade, so that it shows that it's cars that are entering pedestrian space and not the opposite. There is no such a thing as a natural level of car use in a city. It's not like if we make bigger and bigger streets, someday we will wake up and there is no traffic problem. If there was more space for cars in New York or Paris, there would be more cars. If there is less space for cars, there will be less cars. So how much space do we give to cars? This is a political decision. It's not a technical decision. Here, for example, again, these streets in Paris, without parking in the buildings, a very big space for pedestrians, and still you have one of the highest values of real estate in the world there. So it's not like, how should a city, I mean, the most valuable resource a city has is this road space, street space, space between buildings. How should, if we were to find diamonds under Birmingham, it's not as valuable as space between streets. How should we distribute this space between pedestrians, bicycles, public transport, and cars? This is not a technical decision. This is a political decision. In London, for example, look at this. Many streets in central London are much bigger, much more space for sidewalks than for motor vehicles. Political decision. I'm not saying this is good or is bad, but this is an option. Here is what we have here, compare. See? This is an urban highway. This is enormous, you know? I think you could easily take away these two lanes and make a wonderful pedestrian space with trees and nothing will happen. On the contrary, it will work much better. Actually, you have done a nice avenue. I didn't have time to put into my presentation. We have much bigger sidewalks and a separation with trees in the middle, and it feels much nicer and it works fine. And if someday you are going to have traffic problems, that would be the most wonderful thing that could happen to Birmingham. Because we are far from there. In Birmingham, many cities have a problem because they don't have people in the streets, in the sidewalks. But Birmingham doesn't even have cars. You know? There's very few traffic downtown. So we have a long way for this to become even an issue for discussion. This is what you have here. Very radical things could be done there. Just for an experiment. To take half the space for a giant, one street, half of this pedestrian. Where there is space for parking, of course, it is possible. I mean, why not take these cars away and make a protected bicycle way? Parking is not a constitutional right in any constitution that I know. So if you take this space away and you make a protected bicycle way, people are going to say to the mayor, "Mayor, now where should I park?" So the mayor should reply. It's the same as if you ask me where you should put your clothes or your food. This is your problem, you know? This is not a government's problem, you know? Why not take these cars away and make rather a protected bicycle way? shopping malls. Whenever shopping malls replace public pedestrian space as a meeting place for people, that's a symptom that a city is ill. Great cities don't have shopping malls. You don't find shopping, and it's not because of the weather. You know, it's very cold in New York, Manhattan, you don't find shopping malls. It's very hot in Madrid. In the summer, you don't have shopping malls. So, of course, there are better ways of doing malls. When they are open and they mix big housing on top of the shops, and then you can almost get something nice. But the worst thing that can be is, I mean, imagine if you're a tourist and you arrive to a new city you have never been to. And what is it that you do? The first thing you ask the concierge at the hotel is, where is there a nice place to go walk and see people? And if the concierge tells you, go to the mall, you know, because if they blindfold you and they put you in a mall, you don't know where you are anywhere in the world, because you don't know if it's in Istanbul or it's in Bangkok or it's in Bogota or it's in Miami, because with the globalization, all the shops are the same, you know, the shopping malls, you know. You always find Zara and whatever. They keep them all at the same temperature. You don't know whether you are in the tropics, in the winter, you don't know, you know. The shops are the same. It's, anyway. A great city has people and all these shops in the street, not in the malls. People walking. People like to see people walking. Why do people like to go to Manhattan to walk and not to Houston? Imagine how boring it is to walk in a Houston sidewalk. Because there are no people, there are no shops, nothing is, I mean, maybe the museum in Houston is very good, maybe the restaurants are very good, but the attraction in a city is mostly people. When you go for tourism, always, tourism is a pedestrian experience. Always, when you want to go as tourism, you want to walk. If you see tourist magazines, you will find, even in Disney it's very interesting. Many studies show that in Disney, people spend only 3% of the time in the attractions. The rest of the time, well, in line, and walking, and so people pay basically to walk, to be in a pedestrian environment and eat hot dogs. This is a great sidewalk in London. I mean, this is what we want. This is Paris. This is the Champs-Élysées, maybe the most famous. This is interesting because, for several reasons, this is maybe the most famous sidewalk in the planet. You could send some consultants there and from Bogota and say, hey, you're so stupid, Mr. The French, and, you know, because I can tell you, there is more than enough space there to park cars as well as for people to walk by. Those sidewalks are too wide. Do you think it will work the same? Clearly it would. And also an interesting thing about the Champs-Élysées, which is one of the most walked streets in the world, is that it's a giant street with about 8 lanes for cars. It's not a pedestrian street, you know? So, this is interesting because we don't have time to go into this now, but there's a difference between an avenue and a highway. An avenue is a big road which moves a lot of cars, but it has also a lot of traffic lights, and it has big sidewalks and people like to be there. For example, in the east side of Manhattan, there is a highway. In the west side, there is a road with traffic lights and things. And the difference between the capacity, this is for engineers to measure, the capacity between a highway and an avenue is not much. It's about 20%. A highway without any traffic lights only moves about 20% more than an avenue with well-synchronized traffic lights. But the damage, of course, done by a highway to the city is horrible. While the avenue not only does not do damage, but sometimes is very wonderful, such as Champs-Élysées. But we don't have time to go into this. But this is a challenge for engineers to measure. Well, let's go quickly. Pedestrian spaces here, like this park here, full of children, wonderful, in Birmingham. This wonderful park. Pedestrian spaces are magical. But transport is a very peculiar problem, because transport is one of those problems that tends to get worse as societies get richer. If Bogota was twice as rich, we would have better health, better education, but traffic jams would be worse. Trying to solve traffic jams with more roads or bigger roads is like trying to put out a fire with gas. No city in the planet has ever solved traffic jams with bigger roads. Why? Because what creates traffic is not the number of cars. That's only a small ingredient. It's the length of the trips and the amount of trips. So the bigger roads you make, people make longer trips and they make more trips. And it's very easy to prove. I mean, clearly for traffic it is the same to have 10 cars which go 1 kilometer, 1 mile each. 10 cars will go 1 mile each, as to have one car that goes 10 miles. It takes up the same road space. So this is why it never has been solved. You can make bigger and bigger highways, it will never be solved. For example, here was mentioned, I just heard Brian's presentation, what to do with Highway 280. All I will ask you to do is never to make it bigger, please. Today we all agree that this suburban expansion in the United States is one of the most harmful things to quality of life, the environment, energy, everything. Why did it happen? Of course, there were some urbanists who proposed this in England towards the end of last century, but mostly it did not happen because it was planned. It happened because every time there was a traffic jam, engineers came and made a bigger road. And so people could go farther and farther and farther. If they had had traffic jams, it would have been the best thing that could have happened because people would have been forced to stay closer to downtown. So, one thing that is interesting to understand is this. Mobility and traffic are two different problems which have two different solutions. Mobility is solved with public transport. But even the best public transport in the city, in the world, will not solve traffic jams. London, for example, has one of the most fantastic public transport networks in the planet. And still, they had to create congestion charging because there was too much traffic jams. So you could have a subway line on every street and still you have traffic jams. The only way to solve traffic jams is restricting car use. And the most obvious way to restrict car use is to restrict parking. Of course, there are other more sophisticated ways, such as the one in London with congestion charging. Busways in highways, this is what I would do on Highway 280. I would put buses on exclusive lanes. And buses can do the same as rail and better because buses can come close to where people, for example, in New York, you have many suburban rail. So people in the suburb, they drive to the station or their husband or wives driving to their spouses driving to the station. And there they take the train or they take a bicycle or a taxi or whatever. Buses can do much better because they can come close to where people live, and once they go in exclusive lane in the highway, they go just as fast as a train, as a suburban train. So buses I need to defend buses here. Why? Because I think buses are the only way to solve really mass transit in the world at this time. But buses have a bad image, you know. Now the buses is not sexy. They are for Colombians and Mexicans and blacks, you know. Not very sexy. But it's interesting. In 1940, every city in the planet with 100,000 inhabitants or more had trams. And when buses appeared, in a matter of 10, 15 years, trams disappeared. And it was not because General Motors scrapped them and all this story. No, I mean, this is maybe 5 or 10 cities or whatever, 15, nothing. We had thousands of cities with trams. Why did trams disappear? Because at that time, trams had a very bad image. They were not sexy. They were for the poor, you know. They were for the Colombians of that time, you know. And buses were sexy, you know. Now it's the opposite. Buses are for the poor, you know, and trams are, oh, it's in France, you know. Portland, ooh, you know, so sexy, these trams, you know. But trams actually, of course trams are nice and wonderful, but I just like to warn you that they do the same or less as buses and they cost much more. So if you have a lot of money and you have money left over to do a night, but you can do a beautiful bus system, busway with beautiful sidewalks and everything, which you will do much more than the trams at a much lower investment and operational cost. So buses in highways, like in Bogota here, or this is in Spain. This is a very interesting example because they put this bus lane in a highway coming into Madrid. And there is two suburban rail lines parallel, which have huge subsidies. The buses move more passengers than the two suburban rail lines added up together. Why? Because of the reasons I was telling you. The buses can collect people much closer to where they live, and once they enter the exclusive lane, they go just as fast as a train. Anyway. suburbs, suburbs. This is the issue in Birmingham, and I should have not talked about anything else. This is the big problem. You know, if Bogota had this kind of suburban structure, we would have 20 times, almost 20 times the area we have now with the same population. Clearly, of course, it's impossible to have. What is good public transport? Good public transport is low cost, high frequency, one that goes every 2 minutes or so. If you have to wait half an hour for it, then it's not very, but here you cannot clearly, you cannot have high frequency trains or buses or subways or nothing, because it will go empty all the time, you know? So this of course creates huge cost because people is totally car dependent, so people will, for the environment is the worst. Why is it bad for the environment? Because people have to drive long ways in their cars. It's bad for the environment because when people are so far away, land tends to be very cheap, so they make big houses, so it takes a lot of energy to cool them in the summer, to heat them in the winter. If they were in very compact city, land would be very expensive, they could not afford to have a big house. So, I mean, it's very bad because, I mean, if you are a 15-year-old in these neighborhoods, these American, they are almost like handicapped, you know? They have to depend on their soccer moms to take them everywhere, you know? Any good city in the planet, any 13-year-old, I mean, my son, when he was 13 years old, he would, even though there is a little bit of problem with crime, but he would go all over in the bicycle, by bus, anywhere in any good city. Here, this is why they go crazy when they get their licenses, you know? In Manhattan, the child when they get their subway card, you know, maybe when they are 12, they are already going around by themselves. So this is a disaster. I mean, imagine, and it's so boring, you know, because nobody's walking there. Where would they walk to? You know, it looks very nice, but if you go, I mean, a good city, you should be able to walk to get bread or fresh vegetables. If you have to take your car, it's not a good city. So density is fun. It means people in the streets, cultural activities, restaurants. I mean, you cannot sustain a weird restaurant in Afghan, you know, Afghan food in a suburb, you know, because there is too few people who would like Afghan food. Or, I mean, so let's go quickly because. But what's attractive? Let's go quick. This is the suburbs here. Some suburbs I just went by bicycle. This is my great experience with Birmingham in 2-hour visit. So, but now, urban renewal acquired a very bad name. You know, Jane Jacobs and all these stories and how in the 50s and 60s. However, because of why was it bad? Because they demolished some houses which should have been conserved, or because they demolished neighborhoods which were very dynamic and lively. But actually, that doesn't mean that government should not intervene. I believe in many cities in the planet, we have done fantastically successful urban renewal. Change the name, because this is a very bad name. Sometimes you have to change the name. For example, some names are politically correct. Like before it was swamps, now it's wetlands. No? So we have to change the name. But we have here, this is in a trip around Birmingham, I was shocked. I mean, there were not one or two, but dozens, hundreds of houses like this, closed. Nobody living there, abandoned. Abandoned houses, but hundreds. Just 10 minutes ride bicycle from downtown Birmingham. So, this is amazing, it's shocking. Anywhere in a dynamic city center, you would have, this would be worth a fortune, this land, you know. I mean, if it was a healthy city, it should be worth millions of dollars, any little piece of land there. Abandoned buildings all over the place. You know, it's amazing. It always, you know, a school, abandoned school, closed schools. I was very impressed because this is a half-abandoned stadium, which also has huge amount of land around there. So, I propose with very irreverent, and you will have to excuse me, but to say just something crazy. What would it take? For example, here we are talking with many people from the university. what would it take to get people who already work downtown Birmingham, which are not that many relative to all Birmingham metropolitan area, people who work at the university or maybe at BBUVA or whatever, what would it take for those people who do not have children between 5 and 18 or 20 to move downtown? Maybe, well, grocery stores, maybe giant parks, beautiful parks, maybe safety net. How about if we did some beautiful 10 or 20-story high apartments, amazing apartments with parks, with pedestrian areas? How if we were to demolish all of that? All of those neighborhoods, demolish all of that and there would be more than enough space to relocate the people who live there as well there. It's not that we want to kick them away, no. It's enough space to bring a lot of highly educated, well-paid people downtown as well as to relocate the people who live there now. You could do something radically that you could do. I mean, the problem is so terrible that it's at the same time a great opportunity because that land is worth nothing. It's empty, it's abandoned. Half of this is abandoned. So you could get it for almost nothing. The price is so low. And you could do, I mean, I would love to do a study with the high-income people who work in Birmingham who don't have children between 5 and 18. What would it take? Say, shopping, supermarket or delicatessen, maybe to have restaurants nearby, to have movies that you could walk to have what would it take? Because I am sure there should be a market. I mean, why would they want to live there? I mean, I have met people whose children went to college already, who work downtown at the university. Why would they want to live in one of the most fantastic, high-quality design places in the planet, 10 minutes away by bicycle from the university? Why not? There must be a way. And this has to be I mean, all of this, imagine, all of this, only here, there is a huge amount of land. Around neighborhoods like this, huge. You could do a new city, and with the best urban design in the planet, with the best architecture in the planet. Why would high-income people not want to come here? Much more attractive than to be out there in a lonely suburb, especially now. Maybe it's impossible. Maybe people really love their garden, but it seems to me, when I see the gardens, I love that people have gardens in the suburbs because this gives a lot of jobs to Colombians and Mexicans. But actually, even when they do a barbecue, which is what people usually do, normally they put the barbecue close to the home so they don't have to walk all across the garden with the food and all of this, you know? Anyway, so maybe we should not even use the word density because it's a dirty word. We have to be careful. It's like urban renewal and all of this. So, because it means something different. When each person talks about density, each person has something different, and sometimes people think it's horrible. They think it's going to be Manhattan or something. No. But let's look at some density. Some rich people live in these pictures I'm going to show you. So if rich people live there, it's because it's not so bad, because they could choose anywhere they wanted to. So this is in Switzerland, for example, or in the Netherlands, wealthy people, or in Boston, Manhattan, wealthy people living around there, or in Florence, or in Melbourne, Spain, London. Very wealthy people. I mean, even a small apartment there is £1 million. So there must be something that people like there, you know. It's so Washington, Georgetown. But it's possible to do something even different and better than the Village and to Georgetown and to Boston. I think it's possible to design a completely different city which has not yet been designed. This is a challenge for the University of Alabama urbanists and architects. So, for example, this is an interesting thing. This is a very wealthy small city in the Netherlands called Houten. No cars. No cars. Everybody can come to their home by car, of course, but they cannot go across the city by car. It's much faster to go by bicycle. Only bicycle, and they come to the station, they live in the train station. Look, high density is extremely expensive. It's not a low-income neighborhood. No cars. Houten. This is just an example. Why not design different thing with, for example, imagine this beautiful railroad park that you have, but surrounded by things like this, in these areas which are abandoned. These are completely abandoned. Of course, the best way to avoid discussion is not to do anything. I say, oh, if I say I have to demolish these houses, I will be accused of gentrification and all kinds of horror. So politically it's very difficult. So the best thing is to do what we have done, nothing. That's the easiest thing. So, but I challenge you that maybe you have a fantastic historical opportunity to redo Birmingham. You have all the land available to do something amazing, to bring very high-income people as well as to relocate the low-income people who live there. Anyway, let's go quickly because I have let's go quickly because I'm just going to show you to rush to the end. In Bogota, we started restricting car use by tag numbers. 40% of cars cannot be out in the street during peak hours every day to tag numbers. I mean, this is not the most intelligent way of doing it. It's just to say it's one way of doing it. It's much better in London congestion charge. Let's go quickly. It seems that we have to advance towards a society in which we will tax much more car use in order to subsidize better public transport. But of course, we don't have people living closer to that. It's like a vicious circle. You don't need public transport if people don't live close to downtown, and you don't need, I mean, it's you have to do both. But in general, the whole world is advancing towards this. In Bogota, we established a gasoline surcharge tax, 25%. And first, as people, of course, were going to the nearby municipalities, we went to Congress and we implemented for the whole country. So that 25% tax goes to the municipality, so that we basically we are not charging car ownership. This is very interesting. We are not taxing car ownership. This is not a sales tax. We are charging for car use, which is different. Okay, this is something interesting we do in Bogota. We talked to Mayor Bell about this. This is every Sunday in Bogota, we close about 70 miles of main arteries during 7 hours. And we're 1.5 million people out riding bicycles. And it's a very beautiful ritual. It's because like people reconquering the city for themselves. Of course, the most fun things in life, generally, we are not allowed to do them. They are a sin. They are sinful. So, people, since we are little children, tell us, don't go into the street, don't go into the street, don't go. And so all of this, well, we can go into the street. So it's a very interesting sensation. But also, you can appreciate the city in a different way. Of course, anyway, Oscar mentioned. Let's go quickly because we approved through a referendum. People voted and we got the first Thursday of every February, we have a car-free day. No cars in the whole city. And 99.9% of the people goes to work and to study as usual. Of course, this is possible because we have a very compact city and there is a lot of public transport. You could not do it in Birmingham. But it's a very interesting example. We also almost got approved. We asked the people to say whether they wanted not to have any cars allowed during rush hours beginning 2:15. And some big businessmen made a huge campaign against that, but they knew we were going to kill them. But in the election, so they said, they asked the people not to vote, no, but not to vote. They asked them not to vote. And we needed 33.3% of potential voters' participation for this to become legally mandatory. And we missed it by like 0.2 percentage points. And let's go quickly finish. Bicycles. This is a university, same as going to the University of Alabama in the future, at the university this is in the Netherlands. As movies in the Netherlands. If we want people to use bicycles, we need to provide them high quality bicycle infrastructure, not just to protect it, but to increase its social status, to make it sexier. You have to hit them with great quality, important infrastructure. Bicycles are serious things, and they have to have quality investments. You know that you can even flirt even though she doesn't pay attention. A train station, parking in the Netherlands for bicycles. London. Well, Oscar mentioned something about Bogota time. Well, this is something that is I don't know exactly if it's the name, the British Statistical Office. This is not some kind of green NGO, no. The British Statistical Office has certified that for any trip less than 5 kilometers in central London, the fastest way to do it is by bicycle. It's faster than car, than taxi, than subway, than anything else. And 5 kilometers is, well, we started to do a lot of bicycle ways in Bogota. Bicycle ways are also very democratic, very beautiful, because what people, before we were in City Hall, nobody used to take bicycles to work. They are good to protect cyclists, but also they show that a citizen on a $30 bicycle is equally important to one on a $30,000 car. What we are doing is also raising the social status of the cyclist. I would say, I mean, is to have a protected bicycle way, is it a right or is it some kind of cute architectural thing? Today we accept that to have a sidewalk is a right. If you get run over by a car in a place where there is not a sidewalk, I am sure you will sue government and you will get a lot of money probably. Now the question is it a right to have protected bicycle ways everywhere? I think we should get to that point. Unless we think that the only people who have a right to safe mobility are those who go in a motor vehicle, which will not be very democratic. Let's go quickly, because this is Bogota again. Of course, in a dense city, bicycles are very useful because distances are very short. Let's go quickly. We also created this system. I like to just, we don't have time to go into this, but I saw some very interesting proposals for Birmingham with buses. This system, I'd like to tell you something, is moving more passengers our direction than all subway lines in the world, except for 5 or 6. It moves, has moving much more passengers than any subway in the United States or in Europe or in China. It's moving 47,000 passengers our direction. People pay when they enter the station. Then the buses doors open and the station doors open, like in Naves at airport, and so you can get 50 people off the bus and 50 people into the bus in seconds. And so, but we don't have time to go into this. Just to say that buses can be and have many interesting advantages over subways. I'm not saying it's better or worse. It has some different. For example, when 2 subway lines intersect, you have to get off and walk a couple of blocks and wait for the next train. Buses can change lines without people having to get off, and many other advantages we don't have time to go into. Quickly, quickly. It increases real estate values. Here what this high-income building says is, you should win, you should buy an apartment here and you will win the increased value of the Transmilenio, which is we had to call our bus system Transmilenio, you know, because buses have a very bad image, as it was mentioned here by the mayor, by Mayor Bell. So in order to make buses a little sexier, we called it Transmilenio instead of bus, you know, and in Bogota it was very successful because nobody who takes the new system calls them buses, calls them Transmilenio, which is, but so it has increased values. Here is, for example, advertisement by one of the largest housing builders in developers in the city, publishes a map with the network of the bus system, and then because they know this increases the attractiveness, this increases the value of land every time you put one of these things, because the same as it happens with subways or trams. Okay, let's go quickly, finish because it's too late. Okay, this is in different cities, in Brisbane, in China. Where there is no space for buses, that's when you most need it, where there is most traffic. Sometimes even to turn a street into only a bus street. We could do this in the new development that's going to happen in Birmingham, to have some streets just for buses, no cars. Downtown Bogota, we took cars out of one street. We made a huge investment to improve pedestrian space alongside the busway. Anyway, so I would just, maybe in terms of, well, finished. I just thank you very much.